Hey, Dean, it's Lisa Dillon. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I know you and Jeff Solomon planned for many different scenarios, but how difficult has it been for planning for the summer in terms of sort of the moving salary cap number?
Well, I think it made it clear it's been very difficult. It's like making those equations, right? So we got putting the cap number aside and the cap space, and whether we look at buyouts or moving players, that's hard enough. I think it's probably safe to say in terms of the team, we got it down to like 4 templates, but then each one of those templates has to be run through 3 cap numbers, which then requires some adjustments. So that's just the way it is. But it's like I told you before, it's probably as big a science project as we've ever had. So you got, like I said, you got about 4 templates on the board, but then each one of them is run through 3 different numbers, and then those 3 different numbers, depending on how you start moving things around, has its own effects. So I think it's safe to say at least, usually like at this stage after, the season and all the work that we've had to put in here, at least we have a working document. It's almost like just having a first draft. Mm-hmm. And like we know about first draft, it's very far from the final draft, but at least we have the boundaries we think we'll be working within.
Keeping that in mind, have you determined what you want to do with Mike Richards?
No, we haven't. I don't think we've made a final determination on anything, because in terms of dealing with that, you have a number of scenarios: a trade, a subsidy, a buyout, and all those would probably be reflected on which of the other, how the other pieces fit, right? So there's a number of ways to deal with that cap hit. So you could actually throw that into the mix, right? In terms of the, you want to look at it from, I said there's 3 templates after the 4. Then looking at how that contract is dealt with has its own ramifications. So, but, you can figure out for yourself the options that are before us. And the thing that's happening now, now once the combine's over and, now there's only 2 teams left. At least now, I think there's more dialogue. I've had more dialogue the last 2-3 days than I did at some substance versus anything I had after the end of the season. So.
Thank you, Dean.
Okay.
Hey, Dean, it's Rich Hammond. I'm just curious. I mean, there's so many things up in the air here. Is there any one domino that has to fall first? I mean, whether you're talking about Richards or UFAs or the situation with Voynov, I mean, is there any one thing that has to set the rest in motion?
That's kind of funny. I don't know. Is it more like there's... I'm not sure if that... I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure. I think it's more like just one, no matter what it is. If you see, if there's like 4 or 5 things you're looking at and the one that comes up you like, the options you look at when you're talking to the GMs, you kind of got an idea of which you'd like. So it depends which comes around first, I'd say, versus saying, well, we got to do this before. Because the other things that might come off that one are the things we can control. So, I guess the answer to your question, is there one that has to fall? No. I think any one of them could fall, and maybe none of them will fall. But, but I think the only other thing I'd throw in there, though, that we're working towards is signing Toffoli and Jones. So, I don't know if you want to, that's not a domino because that's been a priority since you saw during the season, we were fortunate to get Nolan done and Clifford done and Martinez and Muzzin and Pearson. So we want to finish that up, that those 7, 8 players that are, not even in their prime yet, was to keep them in the fold. So that's a little different than the question Lisa asked, but that's not a domino. That is something we're actively pursuing daily.
And where are you with Justin Williams? Is there any chance that something could get done in the next month, or are you kind of set on him going?
That would require your domino. So there's like of the 4 there.
Yeah.
So that's one that. Okay, so kind of fits with what you said. To make that happen, you have to have another. That would be your domino theory. So that's some of the things. One would be one of the things we're looking at. Yes.
Hi, it's John Rosen. I just was wondering if there's any update that you have on the negotiations with Andre Sekera, and if they've really kind of kicked into any next gear or anything that you're able to share with us. Thank you.
Sekera, the only thing I could say is I think we have, which is not always easy to get, but I think we have the parameters of a number. Up until late last week, oftentimes it's hard to get even a number to see if you can plug it in. So I think we have the range that it would take. Now, have we been countered with an offer yet? No. That's all I can say on that one now. I would say I don't think his number is outrageous. I think that, he'd like to stay here. And so by virtue of that, you kind of work, he ends up in one of your something in some of your schematics there. What was the other part of your question?
I was just wondering if it had been more advanced. You answered it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dean, this is Josh Cooper with Yahoo Sports. Obviously, this time last year, you guys were preparing for the Stanley Cup final. This time, you're sort of trying to reflect on kind of what went wrong and how to sort of rebuild and get back to this point. I guess, how much work lies ahead of you this summer, and have you had time to really think about where you were a year ago and where you are now?
Well, that's all we've been doing. I mean, that's, I'd say within 5 days after that season ended, there was a lot of debriefing that had to take place. I think that's where you start. The coaches spent more. I think it's also different this year because, as you say, not making the playoffs is a very different meeting. The length of the meeting than we've had in the past. The coaches prepared a binder that was certainly bigger than we ever got, as it should be, I guess. So, you're debriefing, you start with your players, then meet with the coaches. I think also we talked in depth that this is really the first year. You heard me mention this before about the idea of the conditioning and nailing that down, that because of what had happened in the past, it was more recovery-based off season than upgrading our conditioning. A lot of time was spent on evaluating that, coming up with standards. Now that we have that opportunity, and then obviously a lot of time was spent with our off-ice issues. We had to face up to what happened there, and it was the same thing. What could we have done, to prevent this? And more importantly, what's our approach here in the future to make sure these don't happen again. So I don't know, and in between that and, where we started with the templates and everything else, it's been pretty much, nonstop. So, and I guess too, and this is one thing, we've taken some hits this year, and the one thing that I haven't seen, nobody's pointing the fingers in the wrong direction. The whole goal here is everybody points the finger at themselves, and let's go from there. And so, our players have, regardless of what they've been through, we've never had any that stuff when we were winning, and I'm better than anybody else, and we didn't have any of this pointing the fingers when, things fell out from under us this year. And that's the one thing that's been consistent, and in terms of their approach. And I think in the long run, well, I think like anything else, I think if you've been, I've said this with the season, we were all struggling to find that certain hit or whatever you want to call it all year. And when it was over after Edmonton and Calgary, I think the reality is we got what we deserve. And we have nobody to feel sorry for, whatever excuse, but how does it feel now? And every time we thought we were going to get out of it because, we knew how to win or we had been in big games before, well, that didn't happen. So, but now we can learn from it. And I think, you've heard me say this before, if you look at the cores of teams, if you believe a core is 7 players, you've got a team whose core is intact, that's won 2 cups, has won 10 playoff rounds, and their average age is 26.5. This is a marvelous opportunity for a lot of key players, secondary core guys who've won, they're still together, to learn from this and make us better. If this group was, if this had all happened and our core was, averaging 34 years old or something, you go, holy smokes, but wait a minute here. And I think maybe that's part of it too. Maybe having that success with so many young players might have been a product here. That, handling success can be as difficult as handling failure. And let's face it, we didn't handle it. But we've got a marvelous opportunity with this group to have learned from it and make us stronger. If we approach it like that, then, it could be an even stronger group. And, only time will tell, and only the players will determine that. I think your first indicator of that, I think our top players have a chance now to become our best conditioned players. I think any great team, if you look at the Lidstrom, the Eisermans, the Bradys, all those teams, Kobe Bryant, the top players set the mark, but not the coach or anybody having to get in their ear. They show up in the top condition, ready to go a full 82 games. And it's been hard, because we've been playing in June. Well, this time there's no excuse. And it's a marvelous opportunity for our top players to in fact take over that room. And they start by doing that, becoming the best they can be. And I think they will, because there's no doubt in my mind about, what guys like Kopitar and Dowdy and Quick stand for. And hopefully that, that this is awakening. It's no fun watching the playoffs. So, in the long run, we could benefit from this.
And secondly, and thank you so much, in terms of, the draft is obviously a time for moves and general managers get together and talk. Are you looking for just kind of small, kind of tinkering type moves, or is there anything that came across your plate? Would you take a swing at it?
Well, I think if you look at our team, I don't see a major move. And I think, you never say never. I mean, I hate to say it, but the truth is, now that people are talking more in earnest, I don't look at anything. But if you're asking me to predict, do I see a major move? No. But I could get a phone call 5 minutes from now that I didn't expect. It's happened before. But it's certainly not the priority sitting here that I need to make a big move. To me, the big move is, like I said, those guys are all 25, 26, 27 years old. The big move is taking another step in terms of their preparation and assuming more of a leadership role. That's the big move. If we do that, we'll be more than fine no matter what we do.
Dean, you mentioned the off-ice stuff, and I'm just wondering, A, what your reaction was to the stuff with Jared, even though I know it's still a legal matter, but your reaction to that, and did that kind of give you the impetus to, want to make sure that stuff gets curtailed permanently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that both incidents generated a lot of discussion during the year, and were clearly in the first meetings and the debriefings at the end of the year was the number one topic before we even got to the hockey. The first thing you look at is, were there any signs that we should have been aware of for both these incidents? That if you look at yourself, managers, coaches, I think we are very good in terms of communicating with our players, go out of our way, to try and know them personally as human beings. I think it's one of the reasons we've always had that kind of family effect around there. But clearly, we could do more. That maybe if, with the coaches, the managers, even the personnel people, that was, if those people could open up to us, would maybe we've been aware of this potentially happen. That's the first step. The second thing, and this is what I said when the Voinoff thing, I walked down to Jeff Solomon's office, said, this is my fault. And I'll tell you a story, too, that we neglected to educate our players. We spend time teaching them systems, nutrition, and everything else, but we missed a big step here in terms of ensuring that they understand right and wrong, and that this has to be reinforced not only as a human being, but as somebody who's representative of your community. So it heightens the need for this. And what really irritated me in terms of my own failure was, if you read Bill Walsh's book, and I think you guys know how I feel about that 49ers organization when I was coming up in San Jose. It was just filled with winners, and you talk about, in Walsh's book, were so far ahead of his time. There was a section in Walsh's book in 1985 or 86, what it is, talking about the need to educate your players about domestic violence. So, as the general manager of the team, this guy was 35 years ahead of his time, and I'm sitting there that we had done nothing as an organization to maybe head this off. And I guess that's just another reason why the 49ers, that organization at that time, will go down as one of the greatest ever. And to see that in Walsh's Bible, that, you kind of refer, it's one of those books, if you've ever seen it, you never get done reading it, you always refer back to it. I said, this separates, what made Walsh and those guys, but this guy is ahead. And so he was already educating his players, and we did nothing. So that starts here. If Bill Walsh is, I'm not saying, is thinking along those lines, well, why aren't we, And I don't mean to say that anybody in this organization is Bill Walsh by any stretch. The point is that they were proactive in recognizing this as a potential problem and educating their players. So that's where the next step, so you'd like to, hopefully be there if a player needs to come to you, but we are starting, we have met Mike Altieri and Jeff Solomon and myself. We met with a number of domestic violence groups. Mike's in the process of finalizing an arrangement where they're going to come in and educate all of us on it, quite frankly, about, I'm interested in some of this myself. We all need to learn about it. And then as far as the other thing, Chris Herron's coming in to deal with the drug issue. I think he's a fabulous, I don't know if you guys saw him on 30 for 30, but I saw his story on 30 for 30, and Mike and I were talking, so let's get this guy in here. It's a powerful, powerful story. Let's get that on the block. And there's a few other things we're going to do. So this is part of it. This is now no different than nutrition. There'll be no ifs, ands, or buts. It's part of being a pro now. And I just regret that I didn't have the foresight of full wall to head this off at the pass. But you can be assured that we've learned from our mistake on this. So that's kind of the way we plan on dealing with it going forward. And that's it. Like I said, there's a lot of discussion. I think, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Why weren't we aware of it? And how are we going to stop it in the future? That's kind of in the end result, what we've come up with at this time.
Thanks, Steve.
Dean, a little follow-up to that. Have you actually had the opportunity to speak to Jarrett after what happened? And is the team sort of conducting its own internal investigation? And it sort of sounds like, obviously, from what sort of things you mentioned.
Internal investigation?
No, first of all, have you had the chance to talk to Jarrett Stoll in the aftermath of everything? And
Yes. Yes, I did. And I think it's safe to say, in all honesty, it's probably the most difficult meeting I've had in my career.
The most what? I'm sorry? Difficult?
Probably one of the most gut-wrenching meetings I've had in my entire career, and I've had meetings with lots of players.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
What was the second part of your question?
I know the team talked about having an internal investigation, and it sounds like that kind of is what's been going on, some of the things you mentioned. Is that the case?
Oh, no, I don't think we were doing an internal investigation for purposes of indicting people. More, it was an internal investigation of us,
okay. Not
the player. No, we weren't investigating whether he had this or, this happened on the night of the incident. No. This was all about us. We're taking, under the assumption that this did happen, whether I guess this is out of a factual issue. But we can't afford to be at square one where there's even a presumption of guilt. So all that internal investigation, nothing to do with whether or not the player did this, the player did that. It was all about what we could do, what we did wrong, why nobody was thinking like Bill Wall, that type of discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dean, it's John again. Obviously this team, it could be a little bit younger. When you look at the players under contract for next year, the oldest player is Marian Gaborik. Obviously there will be players from Manchester looking to come in and compete for roles too. But, when you speak with Daryl, he often talks about, and he referenced Robin Regeer this way, as players who are extensions of the coaching staff. In addition to incorporating perhaps some of the younger players as well, how do you look at that? And is it maybe not a priority, but something that the team is considering by any means of bringing in a player that, like the Kings, has experience and might be one of the older players in the room, given that the room might be just slightly younger next year?
Oh boy, Johnny, you're asking questions like I answered too long. Is that John?
That's me. Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing about this group. Like I said, people forget how young they are, but they're not young and experienced. I said, I put these young guys down that are all 27 and under. They've been to the state conference finals 3 times. So that's all experience is. I mean, we're incredibly fortunate to have players that many 27 and under that have been through those wars. And so in a way, they are veterans. It's just that they don't have the mileage usually, which is exciting for us. And as far as the Robins, I totally agree. We all know how important those guys were to the process. But there's also a time for, what I talked about earlier. There's enormous growth potential in Kopitar and Dowdy and Quick and Carter and Muzzin and all these kids. And they've seen they've seen how Robin Regier conducted himself. Now it's your turn. And no doubt it's time. So, and that's essentially where you always wanted to get, right? What I said earlier. The best players are your hardest workers and take over the room. And they have a chance to do that with the Stanley Cups under their belt. They're still growing as human beings. But deep down, I think we all know they're good kids and they're not perfect. But I'm expecting big things out of those three, and a number of other ones in that room. In terms of, I'm expecting these three to come back. They've never been at the top of our list in terms of conditioning. And I think that's going to be the first step for these guys that, okay, it's my turn. So, we've had to, I think, and that's, these guys, we shouldn't have to import that anymore. That's kind of the way we look at this. Training wheels are off. It's your show.
Thank you.
Dean, this is John Hoven. Just curious if there's any update on Mike Fuda and his situation about staying or leaving the organization.
Mike Fuda is still Los Angeles King. And will remain a Los Angeles King. You don't think a guy could jump ship now, right?
Well, there were formal interviews.
Yeah, well, we kind of all right. That's
so
a big challenge ahead of us. So I don't think he's had time to think about it. He's been going 100 miles an hour. He's at the combine now.
Hey, Dean, Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com. Just in that regard with Mike and the draft, when you guys in the staff all get together, where do you see the comparative strengths of this draft? And is there, a certain position that you kind of want to look at as far as when you get around with that first round pick?
You're free to talk to Mike directly if you'd like. But I will say 90% of the time, when you drop an 18-year-old, you heard it time and again, it's about the best player. I do think in talking to Mike, actually, even before I got on this call again, that he's, I'm not sure where it could go. I'm getting a lot of active proposals to move up, down, move it. So, in terms of the player we'll select, he'll always be the best player. But in terms of how active we could be with it, I sense there's a little more, like I finished with the boys, they were there all last week, and they seem to have a lot of juice to look up, down, all around, which means we'll probably end up doing enough for picking. So. But if you want to talk to Mike in detail about the draft, you feel free to call him. He's at the combine right now.
I will, thank you. Just as a quick little follow-up, when you look at this draft, is it one of those drafts where, you mentioned moving up, moving down, where, it would behoove you to maybe try to get a second first-round pick, that the strength that high is worth trying to be a little creative?
To get an extra?
Well, yeah, if you can get an extra first-round pick or move down and maybe get a couple of early second-round picks and just sort of be creative.
Yeah. No, that's, it's one of the things, too, like, with the success we're having in Manchester, well, that's one of the things we're alluded to. Like, we're going to have some younger guys, obviously challenging for jobs here from Manchester. It also, we're getting people calling about, well, if you don't want to put them in your lineup, we'll put them in ours. You know, it's one of the things that happened too, like the way that team's performed and the youth of that team down there. It not only bodes well for us getting some, you know, multiple swings to fill some boxes, but also, if it's too clogged up, they certainly give you the opportunity to pick up extra picks as you're talking. So that's probably one thing I haven't seen in the past is that there's a number of prospects down there that people are calling about and coveting if we don't see a place for them on our team. And that's just like, they've really played well, and some guys that, you know, that you weren't sure of, they just keep on showing up and say, you know what, give me a shot, man. So, and they deserve it. They really, really, you know, the struggles we had up top this year, they're that team down there is like we were the year before, you know, where you could just feel it. And they're fun to watch, you know, and they got a lot of guys, like I say, that paid their dues and deserve a shot, whether it's here or somebody else or somewhere else.
Thanks, Dean.
Okay. Everybody good? Everybody good?
Dean, one quick follow-up along those lines. Jordan Wheel, there's been so much debate about his, you know, future with the organization and how he might fit into the Kings at the NHL level. Just can you talk at all about where things stand with that?
Yeah. You know, he just won't be tonight. I mean, it's hard to explain. I'll give an example too. Like right now, you know, he's always fought the size issue as a lot of smaller players have had to do, and they become so driven. And you know, he goes through has another solid regular season, but you saw in the playoffs in the first round was very physical. You know, Phoenix's team tried to run us out of the building, and they were heavy. And the kid was one of the best players out there, so he showed he could play in a physical series. And the next series is more skill and stuff, and he's more than fine there, even though the space is closing because it's the playoffs. So, you know, he just keeps on showing you. He keeps doubting me, I dare you. It's almost like he says it every time he goes on the ring. So, pretty good.